On today's Ask Zach, we're going to talk about when gigs go bad. Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ask Zach. Today's topic is we're going to talk about when gigs go bad, when you have problems like before, during, the show that really affect your performance, and how you need to think about those things and how you need to overcome them. So I'm going to tell, a story about a recent gig, and we're going to kind of take it apart. And we're going to talk about, how I dealt with it. Then I'm going to talk about a really, really, really important question that you need to ask yourself every time you're going to go play somewhere. Is this a gig or a show? You may think it's the same thing. It's not. It's very different, and it has to do with your mental expectations. And so we need to think about this. So I'm going to talk about that too. First, a quick pause for the cause. I need to thank my Patreon members. I need to thank everyone that's, picked up a t-shirt, everyone that's given a thumbs up, everyone that's subscribed, everyone that's done super thanks or the tip jar. I really appreciate it. And it's what keeps this show going. So please keep it up. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So first I'm going to start off with a gig story, and then we're going to take it apart. So this, just to lay the groundwork, I was playing a show with Paul Bogart, and we kind of run lean and mean. So it's a 4-piece band, Paul on acoustic guitar, my buddy Wes playing bass, my buddy Daniel playing drums, and then I play electric guitar. And so we ride around in a transit, and we have, minimal gear with us. So of course we have a drum kit for Daniel. We've got a bass amp and 2 basses, for Wes, because you always have to have a backup of some kind. I carry a little Headstrong Little King amp, and just 1 amp, and then I have a pedal board that has a DI and a Tone X, and that's specifically besides my other effects, and that's just as a backup in case my amp goes down. Then I have a double gig bag that has 2 guitars in it, usually a Tele and a Strat or 2 Teles. Then, let's see, Paul has 2 acoustic guitars. And then we have what's called the Beast, which is a big rolling rack that has like our microphones in it, and it has a mixer for our in-ear monitors, and it has some wireless stuff in it. And then we carry a small powered PA that we can use for like really, small gigs where a PA is not being rented or provided. So we're not playing like a casino or something of that sort, or a venue that has their own PA. So we were playing a run of shows, and the first one was in Custer, South Dakota. And it's a really fun gig. I've played it multiple times, and we stay with some really good friends of ours. We play with David Lee Brown, and or DLB as he's called, and his wife Doc Brown. We stay at their place, and they feed us and take good care of us. And we got there, and we loaded in to the venue there in Custer, and we quickly realized that the mixer in the rack was busted and it wasn't working right. And we're in Custer, South Dakota. It's not like there's a guitar center or a big music store nearby. So we were, we were in trouble. So we started trying to work on it. We tried to, try to figure out what was wrong, tried to repair it. We couldn't. So we ended up having to run all of our lines, all of our instrument lines, the XLR, everything just to front of house. And then they sent us individual monitor mixes back from front of house. And so we worked through this quickly because we were playing kind of an early show. I think it was like at 7:30 or something like that. And we weren't, we weren't playing at 8 or 9 or something like that. And this was kind of a listening room kind of show, which means that people were there specifically to see us, to see Paul, to hear his songs, to hear, the originals and also the covers, but they're there to listen to music. So we got, kind of a rough, mix in for each of us. And then we went back to DLB's house so that we could change clothes. Cause of course you don't wear your show clothes when you're loading in and stuff. And so we put on our show clothes, as it were, and we got back and they fed us and the meal was great. And then we got up and started the show. And right off the bat, there was something wrong. And not for the other guys. The other guys had their mixes were working, but mine wasn't. So my wireless pack for my in-ears was working, but there was nothing coming out. So, I could hear noise, a little like background noise as I turned it up and down, but there was no music coming through. And I had specifically run my rig to be kind of more quiet because, again, this was kind of a listening room and we didn't want to play super loud. So I turned my amp kind of at an angle away from me because also I didn't want my amp blowing into my vocal mic. And of course, I also had my amp set lower. So I can't hear myself well, and which is a big problem because I can hear myself well enough to chord and play basic soloing and stuff, but where it gets hinky, where it gets problematic is when I start string bending. Because then it's like I can't hear myself well enough to hear whether I'm bending to pitch or not. So I can't hear between this or problem. That's a big problem. Also, as a vocalist, I'm singing harmony vocals and I can hear things in my normal range okay, but when I sing higher and I have to sing softer or more falsetto, I can't hear myself well enough to sing in tune high. So I've got a problem. So I thought about, I could turn my amp, which, I thought about, that's going to be blowing into the mic. I could turn up my amp, which is going to mess up everyone else's mix because everyone else was okay. And I didn't really know what to do. So I just kind of, soldiered through, as it were. And I could hear myself when I got closer to the edge of the stage because then I could hear the mains, the front of house speakers. And so I was just kind of pushing through, and probably 45 minutes in or something like that, I kept thinking, are we going to take a break? But we weren't. And so I realized that I was staring down at the neck, and I probably had my brow, furrowed, and I probably didn't look very fun at all. And I realized that, wait a second, these people are not just guys, that have just come to some place randomly. All these people have come here specifically to hear Paul, or to hear, because it's been advertised, for a month or maybe a couple months. And at that moment, I realized, you know what? I'm going to have to get over myself, and I'm going to have to smile. And I don't need to put a psychopath or a Lawrence Welk smile on my face, but, I need to interact with the audience instead of staring down at the neck, wishing I could hear myself better, or trying to stop the show so that I can go spin my amp around because there was no time, and we're going song to song, and there's not time to go make equipment adjustments. I probably could have turned up, but that wouldn't have really helped because again, the amp's facing the wrong way. I'd have to be spinning the amp and moving everything else around, and there wasn't enough time for it. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to, I had a B-bender telly with me, and so I used that a fair amount because then I knew, the bends were going to be in tune. And then I sang where I knew I could sing it, and then if I couldn't, I just kind of backed off some, and I just did the absolute best I could. I interacted with the audience. I smiled, I looked out, and I looked like and I just decided I'm going to look like I'm having fun because that's why these people are here. And if I look like I'm not having fun, then they're going to be wondering, like, what's wrong with the guitar player? What's wrong with him? Is Paul a bad guy to play gigs for? What's going on? And so they don't need that distraction. That's not what they're there for. They are there to have a good time. And they are there specifically to listen to Paul Bogart. And so I need to do everything I can. So after the gig was over, I start taking my gear down, and then a couple came over to me, and the guy watches this show, and he said, we were randomly in the area. We decided to come here, and he said, I was shocked to see that, that you were playing with this band. And he said, I watched your show. And I said, well, thank you for watching my show, and thank you for coming out. And there was part of me that was tempted to mention the technical problems and to be kind of like, well, I was having some technical problems. So if I didn't play, like amazing or whatever, which is, again, just a stupid ego trip. But I didn't. I just said, thank you for coming out, and meant a lot to me. And I showed him, my guitars and stuff, and we just had a nice time. Then also, there were other opportunities where I was kind of tempted to say something, but I didn't. So I waited until we were done, and it was just the four of us, just, Paul and the band and I. And that's when I said, hey, I had this go out. And at that point, it's very appropriate to say something because I'm not complaining or venting. I'm saying something that needs to be said because that needs to be fixed for the next show. And so we did. We fixed it. And the next show was fantastic. We had the mixer issue was fixed, and we had a great rest of the run. So that's just kind of a snapshot of, because sometimes things happen. Sometimes you get a bad phone call. Sometimes someone's sick. All sorts of things can happen. And you have to realize that it's like people are there to have a good time. And you being sullen or being in a bad mood or being completely into your own space of like, oh, my guitar doesn't sound as good as I want it to, or I can't hear myself as well as I want to, or all those other things. People, sometimes you just have to soldier on and push through and be a professional and do a good job. So it's at this point, I want to talk about the difference between a gig and a show, because to me, they are very different, and you have to prepare yourself mentally for either one. So first off, let's start with the better of the two, and better can be subjective, but a show is one where people are coming to see you, where they are fans of you, and they like you, and they want to hear your music, and they're going to ask you questions about your guitars or about the songs that you did, and they're going to clap in between every song, and they're going to be, and they're going to buy some merch, and they're going to do all that jazz. And those are a lot of fun. They are a good ego stroke, as it were. Then you have gigs. Gigs are where you are being hired to fill a slot with music, and people don't really care about you specifically. And when you're playing this type of gig, maybe you don't get any applause in between every song. And maybe it just, people keep drinking and watching, or maybe they don't pay any attention at all. So another gig that I played this summer was it was for a convention, and we were paid well, we were treated well, we had good accommodations, we had good food, and we played 2 nights for these people, and they were there to network and to, create business relationships. And so the whole time we were playing music, they didn't clap at all, not once. And they talked to each other the whole time because they were there to do business. And we were background music. That's what we were paid for. We were paid to be background music while they made important sales and business connections. And it was hard, because you like playing the shows. You like getting the applause in between every song, and you like people going, woo, or especially yelling out that they want to hear one of your originals. I mean, that's amazing. But you know what? A lot of times the gigs pay better than the shows. And so that gig, it was a great payday. We got treated well, but we just didn't get the ego stroke while we were playing. And you know what? It is what it is. But the biggest thing is that you have to prepare yourself mentally. You have to manage your expectations, and you have to say before you go out, tonight we're playing a show, and we're going to get ego strokes and whatever, and it's going to be great. And sometimes on those, you don't get paid as much money, but they can be more fulfilling. But on the gig, you got to tell yourself beforehand, we're doing this for the money. We are background music. People are not there specifically to see us. We are background music, and we're going to get paid well for it. And it's just you take your check and you go home. And you might be thinking, well, you do gigs, when you're starting out. And then when you get, more established and you have hits and things like that, you only do shows. Well, you're wrong, because even bigger acts that have had hits, they do corporate shows. They do things for Coca-Cola or Nissan or whomever, in which, again, people are coming to a convention or a sales meeting for work purposes, to see new products unveiled and things like that. And you're just filling a slot. And sometimes even artists that have hits can go and play a corporate event, and they can get very little response. And they're used to playing shows, and so it's disheartening for them too. But again, you have to remind yourself, people are not here specifically to see that artist. They are there for work, and you just happen to be there, and you're filling a slot. And it happens. And I've even seen situations where an artist is playing a fundraiser, where you're dealing with this fundraiser. They've invited all these millionaire, billionaire type people, and you have Elton John there playing, and these millionaire, billionaires, the only thing they're thinking about is like, I've seen Elton John 6 times. It's like, why couldn't they have hired Paul McCartney, or something of that sort? Or I'm just here, for the fundraiser. I'm just here to support this, cause or whatever. I really don't care about this music. And again, you get a very indifferent response, in which it can be disheartening, but not if you realize it's like, okay, this is a gig. I'm being paid to fill this slot with music. All right. So, moral of the story is know what you're stepping into, when you're playing either a gig or a show. And you know what? You can be a local, regional, band that plays covers, and you can kind of be a mix of the two, because you can kind of get to the point where you have a following, and even though you're playing all cover tunes, still you can have people that love you and they come out specifically to see you. And even though you just did a cover of Tulsa Time or whatever, they're going to clap because they love you. And I remember growing up in Kingsville, Texas, and there were really cool, local bands that had followings. There was one called Sandy and the Six Pack, another one called Country Breeze, and It's like people went out to see him, but I mean, also they went out because they wanted to go drink and and dance and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of a mix of the both of the two, as it were. So yeah, they're all out there, and remember that people you're being paid to entertain, and even if things are going wrong, whether it's gear or a personal problem or something like that, you have to remind yourself that the old adage is always true: the show must go on. And sometimes you got to put a smile on your face and you got to just do the best you can with the situation. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Bye bye.